Hello and welcome to an as of yet unnamed podcast about watching Doctor Who and then talking about it, but from the beginning of Doctor Who, from the 1960s, the black and white Doctor Who. It's old. And a couple weeks ago, I was talking to some friends of mine, and it came out that I had not watched any Doctor Who, which I don't think is that weird for me as an American person, but everyone else there had seen Doctor Who and certain seasons of Doctor Who, and they were like, oh man, you have to watch it, and these are the seasons you have to watch, these are the doctors that you have to watch. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just add it to the list of things, the mountain of other things that I'm supposed to be watching right now and haven't watched. And then I got an idea that is kind of a crazy idea, I think, but a very intriguing idea to me, which is I could do something that not very many people have probably done who are into Doctor Who, which is I can watch all of Doctor Who. All, I don't know, 30, whatever, 40, how many seasons of there? It's been going since 1963, I know that. I've looked that part up at this point. I can watch every season of Doctor Who, starting from the very beginning, instead of, what I imagine most people who have seen all of Doctor Who or are into Doctor Who, you find the season, you get into the season that you get into, the Doctor that you get into, and then, maybe a certain subset of people go and they go back and try and watch everything. I imagine there's very few people today who have actually watched all of Doctor Who from the beginning to present. And that's not just interesting to me because probably not that many people have done it. I don't know, maybe there are. But also because it's a extremely long-running show that has developed over 6 decades or something like that, right? The idea of seeing how it developed and without any fandom making me want to see whatever, or seeing where something developed, before I got to it. Sort of starting from the beginning and seeing how it actually developed over time. That's kind of an interesting idea to me. And even though I really do not have the time to do it, I thought, you know what? Let's start doing it. And I'm just, instead of trying to watch the good doctors that I was recommended, I'm going to start at the beginning, see how far I can make it, and hopefully watch all of it eventually. And then I'm going to do this podcast, which is just going to be me doing a talkback stuff, like nothing too complicated. I'm just going to talk about the stuff that I've watched and maybe what my preconceived notions were going to be and then how they were or weren't met. Oh, and also if I like it or not. I guess that's a pretty good one. I'll say spoiler alert. I have only watched the first serial, which I'll talk about how these are going to go in a second. I did not expect, because it's black and white from 1963, I'm not someone who generally does super well past a certain age when it comes to media of all kinds, right? If it's video games or movies or TV shows, music, I can probably listen to a lot of different kinds of music, but with everything else, it's generally you go back, there's a certain point where you get past, and I'm like, I don't know, it just doesn't, I can't engage with that. And I figured it was going to be a bunch of seasons of that before I could really get into this. And I gotta say, even the first serial is very basic and simple. Maybe basic and simple isn't quite the right. You can definitely tell, you can see its age. It's not wow, this is so much more modern than I expected. I was still into it and able to follow it and interested. I don't know if it's because it's here's a 20-minute episode, and then that's kind of all there is, and not that much happens in it. That's all it is. That's all you have to pay attention for, but it was able to hold my attention, and I was into it. And also, definitely already had some of those preconceived notions challenged. So the way that this is going to work is I'm going to do an episode per serial. And the way that the serials work, basically, the serials are the storylines that they are telling, and however many episodes it takes to tell, it tells in that. But they're not wrapping up the story at the end of each episode. It's all right, and catch us next time on this to get the next part of the story. That's how each episode basically works until the serial's done. So I didn't really see a point in doing an episode per episode basis or something like that, because it would just be all right, they went to one place and they talked. And that was it. That's all that happened. It was 20 minutes, and they didn't do that much because, it's an old show. They can't really go from place to place that much. The first serial is called An Unearthly Child. And you'll figure out, and we find out why, almost immediately. You're in, 1963 England somewhere at a high school, I think. These two teachers start talking, Ian and Barbara. And Barbara's like, man, I got this student that's so weird. And Ian's like, Susan? Yeah, Susan's really weird. It's basically like, this is the unearthly child that they're talking about. But their problem with them is her is kind of weird. Basically, what they're going on about is like, Susan is really good at some things, and then she just doesn't know or understand other things, seemingly. And then they kind of make it seem like she doesn't understand certain things, but I don't think, like, from the flashback scenes they do, it's not that she doesn't get things. It's like, wink, wink, she happens to know about the future or something, or she happens to know people are eventually going to figure this out. And so she's like, well, you haven't figured this out yet, but that's how it's going to be. That's kind of the vibe, what she's getting wrong. And they're like, how could she not know that we don't use that or whatever? I remember, like, one of the arguments is they're like, in 3-dimensional space, in 3 dimensions, how do you do this? And she's like, well, you can't do it in 3, you have to do it in 5. And the guy is like, oh, I suppose you mean time as the 4th, but what about the 5th? And she's like, space, duh. Obviously. Which to me is like, if that happened in 1963 to me, I'd be like, oh my god, you're a genius, probably, right? Or maybe not, I don't know. Who knows what people were like in 1963. They definitely play it up to be like, yeah, she's onto some stuff. She gets it. They're talking about how she needs to borrow a book or something like that in this scene about the French Revolution, I think it was. Eventually, when they give it to her, she's like looking into it. She's like, oh, that's not right. That's not how that happened. So the bit is she knows things. She knows things no teenager girl should know. Well, that's weird. Lady teacher, Barbara, I went to the administration and I was like, this is a really weird situation. She lives with her grandpa, but I don't know who that is. And I'm just going to go down to her address. So she gets the address from administration, 76 Trotters, something or other. Trotter. I think I wrote it down, but I can't find it. She's like, all right, I'm going to go down there. She goes down there. There's nothing but a junkyard, so she leaves. And now she's basically trying to convince Ian, like, let's trick her. Well, not let's trick her. Let's follow her after she goes home. We'll see what she's really up to, because that's clearly not her address. This is just the setup to, like, them getting involved with the whole adventure. But I was already like, okay, well, maybe the administration just got the address wrong. Maybe she just gave a fake address or something when whoever, enrolled her in the school, right? Wouldn't that be your first guess, as opposed to being like, she's tricking us? But she's clearly going to go to that address. I would assume that that address is just like a fake address or an incorrect address. But they don't assume that. They assume that there's some trickery afoot. And so they decide to follow her instead. We also get a scene of her, like, listening to music. Don't remember who they said the band was, but I did want to look that up just to see if I could find whoever that was. If that was like a real band or something, or like a callback to the Beatles or something. Because, like, 1963, I think this is like the time when the Beatles are taking off. But I didn't do that. It doesn't really matter. The point of that scene is just like, clearly she's an unearthly child. She's not from 1960s England, but she really likes 1960s England. She's enjoying her time here. And then basically after that scene, Ian's like, well, can I give you a ride home? She's like, nah, no, I'll just walk. I like walking in the dark, which is a weird thing to say. He's like, all right, whatever. I won't see you later. And then Ian and Barbara immediately, the two teachers, go to 76 Trotter, the junkyard area, and they just, like, chill in their car and they wait for her to show up. One of the big things about it being in black and white that I noticed, especially from this scene that it's about to take place, but just throughout the whole thing, that's going to probably keep happening, is, like, it's kind of difficult to tell. It's fairly difficult to tell, like, when it's night and they can't see and stuff like that. I mean, you can tell, but it's mostly because of the actors being like, where is it? Oh, no, I dropped my flashlight. It's and much less obvious from what's going on in the show. The only thing I think you can really tell from it being black and white is just like, well, the background looks kind of darker. Ultimately, it's like, well, you just kind of have to use context clues. I think that's just how it worked back then. They wait for her to show up. She eventually does and goes into the junkyard, and they're like, all right, let's get her. Let's figure out what's going on. They go in. They don't find her. Ian's walking around with his torch. That's what they called a flashlight in England. He drops his torch on the ground, and he's like, oh, dang, anyways. And then, I don't remember what his reaction was to that. He was like, oh, no, I dropped it. They kind of stumble around the junkyard, and they notice the TARDIS, right? The police box is what it is. and they like feel it, and he's like, oh my god, it's alive, and it's like vibrating. He like walks around it to be like, man, this thing is weird, which is pretty cool that they kind of note immediately how weird that is. I don't know, because I don't think it would be that weird if you're in a junkyard and you saw something like that, probably. Maybe it would be, but I might just assume, like, oh, well, this is one that, like, was defective or something. Like, oh, this is one that just, they threw this one away or something. They show us that immediately the TARDIS is something special because he's like, oh, man, this thing is not normal. Right off the bat, he's like, okay, this thing is vibrating, it's alive. It's super weird. He'd make sure to walk all the way around it. And then as they're kind of doing that, they hear the door open for the junkyard, and they go and hide, the two teachers do, unable to find Susan, by the way, who's like disappeared. She's obviously in the box. And that's when the doctor walks in first time. And he is an old white-haired Englishman. It's interesting that they chose such an old actor. I don't know what was going on at the time, but I have some ideas because I think I might know what the theme of like the early Doctor Who is type of thing. I mean, I don't know about that, but I think there's sort of a theme that's going to be picked up of like some sort of like old Englishman, too petty. Petty might not be the right word. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it as I get into it, as the Doctor interacts with them more. The Doctor comes in. He's about to open the door to the TARDIS, which is locked. And as he's about to do so, I think Susan like calls out or something from the box. And Ian and Barbara get caught, I guess. Oh, he realizes that they're there, and he's like, all right, what's going on? What are you guys doing here? You got to get out of here. And they're like, no, we're not going anywhere. You clearly have Susan, the girl that we came here looking for, locked up in this box. And he's like, that's crazy. And they're like, show us the box. And he's like, no. And they're like, I don't understand. If you have nothing to hide, then why aren't you going to show us the box? And he's like, I won't. He's like, we're gonna get the police. And he's like, do it. He really just does not want to deal with them, and that's gonna be a running theme with this guy for the entire like 4 episodes of this serial. He's just like, no, fuck you. I don't want to talk to you. You're the worst, and I hate you. He really is already looking down on them so much, and he's gonna continue that vibe for a while. While that's sort of going on, Susan opens the door because she's like, man, what is going on out there? Grandpa, is that you? And then she opens the door, and like they run in and they find out, oh, this is not a normal police box. This is a big giant room, and there's a lot of equipment here that is clearly futuristic looking equipment, and it's a very weird like 1960s version of Sci-Fi. It actually looks pretty cool, especially when you consider everything else in the show. It's like sterile and clean. Everything's like very light, and there's all these doodads and stuff. 1960s sci-fi definitely feels right. It makes me think of like The Time Machine too. Actually, a lot about this show right now makes me think about The Time Machine, the H.G. Wells. Not all, like, it's not a perfect thing, like one-to-one, but just like the way that they're thinking about, the way that they're presenting stuff reminds me a lot of that novel. Immediately, it's a problem. The teachers can't believe what they're seeing. Ian's just like freaking out, just like, what is going on? Barbara wants to leave. She really does not like it. She's like, we got to get out of here, Susan. We got to get out of here. Susan is really upset because I think Susan understands, like, if you're here, that's, like, really a problem. And the Doctor is, like, exceptionally smug and rude. He's really just like, hey, man, you can't understand what's going on here. You're a savage. And this is when it starts to get into, like, what they might be trying to do with the Doctor figure. I don't know. It's really early on. It's also old TV. I don't know what they were thinking in the 1960s. But I definitely get the feeling that this character is intended to be, like, old Englishman. It almost sort of, like, makes me think of, like, colonialism from like the English Empire point of view or something, where they're kind of like, hey, we're here to conquer you because we know what's best type of thing. And the guy, I mean, not that the guy's like violent or anything like that, but it's his sort of attitude of like, you guys are savages. I think he literally is like, remember that red man? These guys are just the same as him. Like, he says something along the lines of like, that red Indian couldn't understand because he was a savage, just like these 1960s Englishmen. Same thing. And I kind of have a feeling that there's something going on there where they're like having him act as if he is so much better than them because his civilization is so much more advanced or whatever, and they couldn't possibly understand what's going on. Ian does not understand. He like won't accept it. So they definitely like running with that theme. But I don't really know if this is something that they're like doing commentary on, or if that just made sense for what was good entertainment at the time in 1960s England. I don't know. But definitely the Doctor, spoiler alerts for the next couple episodes, he's going to kind of continue this and have his own sort of arc. He's going to have sort of his own emotional arc, but his character is really interesting. It's really not what I expected when I was thinking what the Doctor would be. I'm curious what the newer Doctors are like, because this guy he's very flawed character, like right off the bat. He's very smug. He's very like these idiots couldn't possibly understand attitude. And not only that, well, we'll get to it. He's like not hyper competent. It's like unearned, his smugness, which is really interesting way to go with this guy who's the time traveler almost. Very, very interesting route to go with him. Immediately, there's sort of a big, upsetting, dramatic argument takes place because Barbara and Ian want to leave and they want Susan to go with them. And the Doctor's like, you guys have seen this. I can't let you go. Now that you've seen this, you can't leave. You have to stay here. And then Susan's basically like, you have to let them go. You can't just hold them here. And he's like, well, I mean, if I let them go, they're going to tell somebody. So I can't let them go. The only way I could let them go is if me and you left, Susan. That would be the only way to do it. We can't stay here and let them go at the same time. And Susan's like, okay, well, I don't want to leave. If I have to leave the TARDIS, which, by the way, she talks about what it is, and she calls it the TARDIS, and says that it's like, the TARDIS is an acronym she came up with herself, so Susan's actually the one who named it. Susan's like, I will leave the TARDIS and you, Grandpapa. If that's what it takes, I don't want to leave 1960s England. I love it here, so will 3 go? And the Doctor's like, okay, fine, I'll open the door. And then he's like, psych, and then he sends them somewhere, and he doesn't really apparently know where he's sending them either. And everybody starts freaking out. They travel. They do like traveling through hyperspace type of joint, which looks really interesting because it's like 1960s. So it's how they're presenting this is really interesting, trying to show something that's like very trippy, and it looks pretty cool. And when they kind of come back to, they are in a desert surrounded by nothing, I guess, is what it's kind of what it's looking at. And that was episode 1. Episode 2, they start off in this cave, not our heroes. The show starts off in this cave, and they're showing all these like cave people. And it's this one guy, and he's like really concentrating. I will make fire. Za will make fire. I think they introduced him right away, but I know his name, so his name's Za. He's pretty important to the plot. He's trying to make fire for his tribe. And he's the leader of his tribe. His dad used to make fire. He was the fire maker. That's why his dad was leader. Then something happened to his dad. I don't know, he died or something. The tribe got no fire anymore, and it's a big problem because the cold's coming. That's the type of world that we're on now. Caveman, the cold is the biggest thing. The dark is the big thing. The beast will get them if it's too dark. They need the fire. This guy is hyper concentrated on making fire, not in the right way. You can tell right away. He's like trying to do the sticks thing where you rub like a stick onto kindle and you like kindling and you make sparks and stuff like that. Except he's just rubbing a stick in his hand. That's all he's doing is just rubbing a stick in his hand, and it's obviously not doing anything, and he's really hoping it will. And he's getting like mocked by the old woman, who I don't think they ever named. She's just like, old woman. And by the way, they're all speaking English, that's going to be a big thing. Not a big thing. That's going to be an interesting thing for how everybody interacts later, that, they're just like, yeah, I mean, they have to present them speaking English because how else would you understand them? It's 1963. Basically, they're introducing us to these cave people, this tribe of cavemen who are struggling to survive, and they introduce us to their problems. And here's the problem. I'm going to lay it out for you. I don't know exactly what order all of this is revealed in, but this is basically the problem. Za's dad was the fire maker for the tribe, which made him the leader. Za's dad died. Za doesn't actually know how to make fire. He's kind of like the de facto leader, and he really needs to learn how to make fire or the tribe's going to turn on him. Za has a girlfriend who is, by the way, so loyal. Extremely loyal. Every one of the cave people are like garbage, really. I mean, they're like bad, morally. Yeah, they're cave people, right? They do a pretty good job, actually, of them being like, hey, if you're threatened, kill the other thing. Or whatever, right? They do a pretty good job of like, yeah, they don't really have a sense of morality. Like, the civilized people were going to be. Again, kind of nodding back to that weird sort of colonialism style thing of, well, there are different levels to civilization, and the ones who are not as civilized as you are savage. So Za really needs to make fire. He has a girlfriend whose dad is like one of the old men of the tribe, and the old men like the meat. And they're like, man, whoever can make fire, or whoever's leader of the tribe, gets to marry my daughter. And Za really wants to marry his daughter, and she also really wants to marry Za. Like I said, she's very loyal, like surprisingly loyal, all things considered, but she loves Za. There is an old woman of the tribe who might be Za's mom, or might just be a random old woman. I think she might just be a random old woman of the tribe. And she really is like, screw fire, dude. Fire sucks. Fire is what kills us. It's actually bad for the tribe. She really doesn't like it. She's really antagonistic to like everybody she encounters. The only other character of the tribe that actually matters, but he plays a pretty big role, is Cal, a guy from a different tribe whose tribes died in like the last cold where they didn't have fire. And now he's trying to become like the leader of Za's tribe. And people are really they're starting to get into Cal because Cal's bringing in meat. He's killing things, and he's bringing in meat. And, you know, he doesn't know how to make fire, but he's doing more than Za's doing. And that's the cave people's problem. Then we go back to the TARDIS. The two teachers, Ian and Barbara, they passed out from whatever happened when they traveled through space and time. And they're starting to wake up to the Doctor and Susan just kind of like casually sitting over at the console of the TARDIS, like being like, is it safe to go outside? Where are we at? Look at the view screen. We can see there's a desert out there. Look at the Geiger counter. Is there radiation? No? Okay, that's good. Once they get up, there's another argument that kind of ensues because Ian's like, I don't like it. I want you to open the door, and I don't believe any of this. It can't be true. It can't possibly be true. Barbara's like, I don't know. Seems pretty real to me. And the Doctor, again, is being smug. The entire time, he's like, oh, you don't believe me? You don't think it's real, do you? It's real, okay? And finally, he agrees to open the door. It takes a surprisingly long time. Like, if I were the Doctor, I imagine I would just be like, if I was the Doctor, I'd be like, hey, we're gonna open the door in like 1 second, and then you could just look. Instead, he's like, oh, you're trying to treat me wrong. You think that you know more than me, but you don't know anything. Again, he's really weirdly petty about everything. Not everything, just in the beginning of this, he's definitely, I think one thing that they like really like to show about the Doctor is that he does not like humans, or I guess, I don't know, he does not like 1960s Englishmen, at the very least. He's definitely like, these people are idiots and I don't like being around them. They make it clear in these episodes that he was like kind of stuck. He wasn't in England on purpose. Once they go outside, they don't know where they're at, really. He's like, oh, well, the time dial says 0. But that can't possibly be right. So I'm going to go outside and I'm going to take some samples and we'll figure out where we are. So I guess like the time dial is supposed to be broken, or maybe 0 is like beginning of like humanity or something with the TARDIS measures time. They don't really get into that. Everyone goes outside and Ian's like, holy fuck, this is real. I was wrong. Which is pretty cool. Ian's like so hard against everything being real. And then he's like, you know what? I was wrong. This is all real. Straight up. This is real, and this is pretty cool, too. Barbara, Ian, and Susan, they kind of go off on their own, and they're, like, looking at a skull, and they're like, what is this, a horse or something? I don't know. This place is crazy. I don't know where we're at, but it's not England. The Doctor goes off on his own to, like, pick up samples and stuff, and while he's doing so, as he's doing it, he pulls out, like, a pipe and lights the pipe so that he could smoke it, and that's kind of a big deal, because that requires fire, which is a big deal to the tribe's people. And Cal, the guy who gets meat and is trying to take over the tribe, just so happens to be, like, watching him at this time. He goes in there and he knocks the Doctor out and he takes the Doctor. The rest of our people realize something's wrong, I think. They're like, where's the Doctor at? I don't see him. That's weird. Oh, he left his notes here and stuff. This is definitely not right. He's been taken, I'm pretty sure, which Susan is freaking out about. She does not like it. And they're like, okay, well, I think there's a trail here. We can go through this forest and go and find it. Oh, one thing that the Doctor says when they leave, when he first gets out of the TARDIS, is he turns around and he's like, oh, the TARDIS is still a police box. That's not good. So I think the bit here is that the TARDIS is supposed to disguise itself, like automatically wherever it goes. So the fact that it's stuck as a police box is like, uh-oh, that's not how that's supposed to work. But I don't think that he understands why it's messed up. It kind of gets revealed later on, like, spoiler for the very end of this serial, I don't think that he knows how to work the TARDIS very well. I don't think he 100% knows what he's doing. It's kind of unclear to me with the way that it ended, with what they said. But and Susan takes his notebook. Well, this is important. This has all like the coordinates and stuff like that, and the keys to operate the TARDIS. When she said that, I was like, that's foreshadowing. That's going to be really important. It doesn't come up in the rest of the serial, at least. So maybe not as important as I thought it was going to be. Cal brings the doctor to the cave people. Yo, this dude, I saw him make fire with his fingertips. Za, I'm challenging you. I'm taking over the tribe. He's basically like, I bring the meat. I got a guy who makes fire. Fuck you, Za. This is my tribe now. While he's doing this, the doctor is like, he was unconscious. He wakes up, make fire, dude. And the doctor is like, okay, I'll make fire. By the way, all of our heroes, like the people, who we're following, our protagonists, I think they can all understand the caveman easy. They understand that they're basically just speaking English. But vice versa, like on the other side, the cavemen do not really seem to be able to understand protagonists. They seem to kind of just like pick up certain words and stuff. It's kind of weird because there are certain times where they'll play it later on, and we'll talk about it a little bit. They'll be like, what did they say? Oh, they said this. And they're like, I don't know that. Okay. It's kind of confusing as to how the cave people, how much they can understand the protagonist. They can definitely hear them talking, obviously, but they can definitely like mimic what they're saying or something and have some understanding. Really weird the way that they play it, because it's almost like they can't understand anything at the beginning, or maybe they can understand like one or two words, but even that doesn't really make sense. Like, are they speaking English or not? Why can they understand each other? Well, if they can understand each other, wouldn't they be able to understand each other both ways? Is the thing that's confusing about it. Is the idea that the cavemen are speaking like proto-English or something, and so they can like pick up some of it, which, I mean, historically doesn't really make any sense, I don't think, but it doesn't bother me that much. It's just kind of weird, and I never really quite understood it, how much the cavemen could understand, or why the protagonist could understand the cavemen, seemingly without any problem at all. Anyways, so the doctor wakes up from being unconscious. Cal's like, you make fire with your fingertips, dog. Doctor's like, okay, yeah, I can do that. I don't have my matches on me. I need to go get my matches. Obviously, Cal doesn't understand what he's talking about, and he gets real upset. Before anything else can really go down, Susan just like comes out of nowhere and tackles somebody or jumps on somebody. She goes super hard. She's very ready to get her grandfather out of that situation. The four people are now united. Obviously, they're surrounded by cave people. They have no chance to like actually win that fight or anything, so they just get captured. Even though Cal was kind of looking like he was doing pretty good work challenging Za, I think just because, the new creatures are there and they can't make fire with their fingertips, his play does not work. He doesn't get like kicked out or killed or anything like that, but Za remains the leader of the tribe. And the drama between these two cave people is like kind of one of the main things that happens. That's why I'm talking so much about it. It's kind of one of the main thing that happens in the episode. Za makes a plan to kill the people, to basically sacrifice the protagonist. So he puts the four of them in the Cave of Skulls, and they put a big rock in front of the Cave of Skulls, and it's called the Cave of Skulls because there's a bunch of skulls in there. Previous people who have been sacrificed to the orb, which is the sun, I'm assuming. They just say the orb a lot. They seem to worship the orb. It presumably gives fire. Za's like, we're just going to sacrifice them to orb. Tomorrow, the orb is going to reward us by giving us fire. And that's pretty cool. That's what we want. I should note, Cal, throughout the whole thing, is kind of like super down to kill. What he has to kill with, and this is one of the funnier things to me, I don't know why, it's like a chunk of rock. It's like obsidian, I guess. But it's like a chunk of obsidian. It's not like a knife or something like that. He just has like a rock that he's holding in his hand that it's black and white, so you can't really see what it is. I'm assuming it's like, when you see those things of how our ancestors used to make weapons and they would like break rocks or find like sharpened obsidian stuff, and they would like tie that to sticks and stuff. I think essentially that's what it is, except it's just like a chunk of it. Not really made any effort whatsoever to make into some sort of a knife or something. So it looks really funny because it's like they're holding a chunk of rock at somebody's neck, essentially. It looks really weird. Not really anything else happens in this episode. Basically, once they get put into the Cave of Skulls, Their hands are tied with animal skins. Basically, they're handcuffed. And that's the end of the episode, pretty much. Zaw's girlfriend talks to her dad like, Zaw's cool, man. I'm telling you, Zaw's going to be great. He's going to be the leader. He's going to get meat. He's going to get fire. The third episode starts with the old woman who was, the one that's just like super cranky and angry at everybody. And she really doesn't want fire to be brought back into the tribe. So she sneaks over to Za while everyone's sleeping in the cave and steals his knife. Which again, when I say knife, I mean like chunk of rock. I mean like sharpened chunk of rock. She steals that and then she sneaks out. As she's sneaking out, Za's girlfriend, whose name is Her, which I think we find out a little bit later. I don't we know that yet, but that's also pretty funny that her name is Her. She sees this kind of happen, but then decides not to say anything and kind of like goes back to sleep, or maybe pretends to go back to sleep. The old woman leaves and goes to the Cave of Skulls. She can't move the rocks. She doesn't even try. But as it turns out, there's another path in that was kind of just blocked by tree branches or something like that. And the old woman sneaks in to presumably kill the protagonist because she doesn't want the fire and maybe they can bring fire. Instead of doing that, though, she just says, hey, I will free you. I got this way that you can get out of the Cave of Skulls. I'll cut your bindings with my knife here that I stole, with my chunk of rock. And then you can just leave and not make fire. You promise not to make fire, I'll free you right now, basically, is what she says. And they're like, yeah, awesome, let's do that. We can agree to do that even though our group can understand you, but you can't really understand us super well for some reason. As that's going down, Her finally decides to wake up Za and be like, hey, old woman stole your knife. I don't know what she's going to do with it. She just took your knife and left. I think she's going to go kill the people we want to sacrifice to Orb. So I was like, why did you not tell me that when you saw it happen? And she's like, I don't know. She's like, I didn't want to. So they get up and they go outside, but the big rock's still there. They're like, well, old woman can't be in Cave of Skulls because Big Rock's still here. And then they hear the old woman talking to the protagonist through the rock, and they're like, she is in there. What the heck? So they start to move the rock. By the time they get in there, the heroes have left and are running into the forest, but the old woman doesn't manage to get out, and Za and Her are like, hey, what the heck are you doing? You let him go. And she's like, there will be no fire. And they're like, fuck you. What do you mean? No, there has to be fire. She's like, no fire. It will not happen. Fire is bad for the tribe. And Za, I think, just knocks her out. I don't remember exactly how he does it, but he just like knocks her out somehow. And then Za and Her go after the heroes into the forest, which they're really not into. Well, Her's like, we gotta go. I think Her's like, we gotta do it because they bring fire and we need fire. And we can't get married if you don't get fire. Za's like, I don't know. I mean, like, it's dark. The beasts are scary. They might kill us. And then like, oh, well, we gotta do it anyways. So they go chase after the heroes into the forest, which is apparently very dangerous to do. The heroes get a good head start into the forest, but they don't really know where they're going. So I think they kind of get close to the edge of the forest before they run into like a sort of dead beast or something like that, like a dead animal. They kind of have a freak out moment. It's either Barbara or Susan, I think. Za and Her are like, oh, I heard them. Did you hear that? They're close by. So after that happens, heroes kind of realize, like, we gotta hide real quick. This is bad. As they hide, Za and Her show up, and they're like, what is going on here? Oh, no, it's a big old beast! And Za immediately gets into a fight with a beast that you don't see. It's off screen and basically kind of wins the fight, I guess is the suggestion. Like, the beast leaves with Za's axe in his head is kind of like what they say. But Za gets messed up. He's sitting on the ground bleeding and shaking, and it's bad. Our heroes see like all of that go down. Barbara's like, we can't leave them. This dude's dying. We gotta help this guy. And at first everyone else is like, what? And the doctor is especially like, are you insane? Absolutely not. They're right. Like, that is a crazy thing. These people, you're on a time adventure trip. You got to get out of there while you have the chance. Screw this guy that wanted to, like, sacrifice you, man. I'm sorry. But Barbara's like, no, we can't leave them. We need to help. Ian, once he realizes that Barbara is set on this path, is like, yep, okay, we'll do it then. He kind of takes over, and they have a whole scene again of Her and Ian trying to communicate with each other. Ian understands Her, like, what she's saying, but she doesn't kind of get what he's saying exactly, but she does understand some. He's like, get me water, and she does. He'll say something that she's going to repeat later, like word for word, basically. Who, by the way, as he survives, they kind of clean his wound a little bit, and then they realize they know we're here, then probably the rest of the tribe knows we're here. Maybe like the old woman will tell on them or something like that. So they have to get to the TARDIS now. They can't stop or whatever. they decide to make a makeshift stretcher and put Za on that, and then they just like hightail it out to the TARDIS. But before all of that happens, Cal somehow realizes something's going on, and he goes to the Cave of Skulls, and he's like, why is the rock moved? He goes in, he sees the old woman who was still kind of knocked, kind of unconscious there. What the hell happened? Where are the creatures? Where are the orb people? Supposed to bring us fire. And then she kind of like tells him roughly what's happening. They left, and Za and her are going after them. And he's like, you did this, didn't you? And then he kills her straight up. And then he goes to the tribe and he's like, Za and her let the creatures go. And they're going with the creatures to go get fire or something like that. His excuse, I don't really quite understand, because like the whole bit is that the tribe needs fire to survive the cold and whatever. And Za's whole thing is he's trying to get the fire, right? So if Za is making a play to get the fire, I don't really see why the rest of the tribe would be upset about that in any way at all. But they are really upset when Cal's like, he let him go. He's going to go get fire for himself or something like that. And they really don't like it. And then Cal lies to them, which is important for later. And he goes, they killed the old woman. The old woman tried to stop them. And look, the old woman's dead. And he's like, you can trust me because I saw it in her. I saw it in her eyes or something like that. He's like, you can trust me. I can tell. And the old man who's her's dad is like, you're right. I believe you. We gotta go get them. And then it's like one moment later that they're just at the TARDIS, waiting for the heroes to get there. The second that our heroes walk out of the forest, they see all of the cave people just appear out of nowhere, and they're like, oh, okay, we're captured again. And it's like the very next scene, they're back at the cave. So, they don't really, they don't quite make it, but they were almost there. They got close. The forest scenes right here where it's like nighttime, definitely where the age of the show comes into play a lot, because again, it's kind of hard to say like night versus day, but they do have like cues, like it is pretty dark, and they do have like cricket sounds, I guess, or like insect sound, like forest sounds in the background. And like spatial awareness is also pretty weird, because you're just seeing like these still non-moving shots of people just like talking next to each other, kind of hiding, and then it'll just be another shot of another dude, Za and her, being like who knows how far away, and they're like, I think I heard something. We got to go that way. It's pretty clear in the episode, but it is something that I was like, man, you could really see they really had to just like give you as many context clues as you needed to be like, it's nighttime right now, and they're close-ish to each other. Another thing that happens in the forest, the Doctor and Ian start to get into fights over leadership, basically. And the Doctor's being, again, like very petty and like, oh, you think you're going to take charge? And Ian's like, hey, I'm just doing what we got to do to live. I don't want to die, dude. And I think what they're basically trying to do is the whole storyline is like Za and Cal are fighting for leadership over the tribe, and now they're showing like, and the Doctor and Ian are kind of like fighting for leadership over their group as well, or their tribe, if you will. And what exactly defines what the leader is for each scenario is different, but sort of paralleled, I guess. And then that's the end of episode 3. Episode 4 starts with our heroes back at the camp, recaptured, but like with a little bit more leeway, weirdly enough. Basically a big argument kind of ensues between Cal and who's now he's like full on trying to take leadership of the tribe because Za has been injured and he tried to take away the orb people, right? The protagonists, they have quite a bit more leeway in this argument, which is kind of weird. All things considered, because they're like prisoners captured by the tribe. But basically the Doctor convinces the tribe that it was not Za who killed the old woman, it was Cal who killed the old woman. And Cal's like, yeah, I did. She betrayed us or whatever. Basically exposing himself as a liar. And the second that happens, that's a big deal, I guess, with the cave people, because even Za like comes out of being injured and like chases off Cal. Like, you are exiled. You are not a part of this tribe, and don't come back here, and if you do, we're going to kill you. And Za is like completely back. He's got scars on his chest, but he's just walking around. He's good. He's ready to go, and he's going to have a busy night ahead of him. So he's apparently pretty fine from being like basically unconscious 15 minutes ago. That's how I'd guess the time lines up. I don't know. You think Za might really appreciate the protagonist, the heroes, because they saved his life, but he immediately re-imprisons them, and he's like, all right, if they leave there, just kill them. The heroes now realizing, like, they want fire, maybe we can just make fire and impress them. Ian does the actual trick, where you have the stick and you rub the stick against the kindling and stuff to make the spark and like make a fire out of that way. He starts getting that together. They all work together to get that working. As they're making the fire, Zaw shows up to talk to them and basically be like, hey, well, we got two options here. Either you make fire or I sacrifice you tomorrow to Orb, and Orb will help me make fire. And that's how it's got to be. And he does seem like a little bit, he's like, that's how it's got to be, is his attitude. But like, I think he is kind of like, I don't think it's like vindictive. I think he is kind of like, well, you did save my life. That's how I read it anyways. As he's doing this, he can see what Ian is doing, and he basically sees Ian make fire in front of him. Oh my God, you did it. You made fire. All my problems are solved right now. As it's going down, though, they do have kind of a weird conversation, again, kind of paralleling like the Cal-Zaw dispute of who is leader. Zaw is basically like, oh, you're the fire maker, so you're the leader. And he's like, no, the old guy is the leader, actually. And he's like, what? But you make the fire, so you should be the leader. And Ian's basically like, well, no, everyone can make fire, and the fire maker is actually the one with the least power in our tribe. And because everyone can make fire, so it's not a big deal, and everyone should be able to make fire, which I think is not true. I think that's kind of weird that he was like, everyone can make fire. No, not everyone. I mean, I guess if you think like if you can get a lighter or matches or something like that, everyone can make fire. It's sort of a weird, I don't know. It doesn't really line up to actual survival skills, if you ask me. I think really what they were just trying to say is like, in a civilized world, fire is no longer a problem. Fire is no longer a problem. And the people who are responsible for our energy needs, the people who are the least powerful in society, which would be good commentary, but he's also like, well, they're the least powerful because everyone can do it. So I don't know, like, I don't know exactly what they're trying to say here. It kind of sounds like what he's being like, well, the most essential workers we don't care about them and we barely pay them, and that's right. I don't know. I can't really tell exactly what they were trying to go for here, what kind of message they were trying to send. Maybe they were just trying to be like, Zaw, let us go. Just teach everybody how to make fire. It's chill. Either way, Zaw's like, this is awesome for me. Don't leave. You can't leave. I'm going to go get you something to eat. I'm going to get you something to drink. It's going to be great. I'm going to go like establish myself as leader of the tribe with the fire. And the doctor's like, yeah, go do that, and then he'll let us go, maybe. Instead, Zaw does not let them go, and he basically, like, goes and hunts, and I guess is what he does, and he finds meat. He gets them water, and he makes a really big deal about being like, he's basically like, I'm taking care of you, so you guys can't leave, though. You guys are your tribe, my tribe, we're going to join together. I don't see why you would ever want to leave, because we have fire, and that's all we need. And they're like, we do not want that. And he's like, well, I don't care. You have to stay. I don't actually really know why he's so adamant. He thinks that he doesn't really think they are from Orb. He thinks that they are from like another tribe over the mountain or something like that. And he's like, the mountain sucks, dude. The other side of the mountain is awful. I know it's not better there than it is here, so just stay here. But he's real adamant that like he's not going to let them go, which, I would just be like, teach me how to make fire and then you can leave. I would think he would be like, you making fire means that you are a threat to my leadership, but he doesn't really act that way, which is kind of weird. I think he just wants to keep them nearby just in case or something. Or maybe because he likes them. Maybe because he likes them because they healed him or something. And I mean, I can actually get that sort of like mysterious creatures who happen to know more than you do about how to survive. It's like, okay, well, I don't want you guys to leave because you can probably teach me a lot of stuff. That makes a lot more sense, but I don't think he ever says anything like that. Maybe before he gets the chance to, they escape. They, realizing that they are not going to be let free, need to come up with a plan to escape. Well, first they're really dejected. They're like, Ian's like, I can't believe I showed him how to make fire. God, what was I thinking? And the doctor's like, no, we had to try or whatever. And while this is going on, Susan's just like fucking around. Man, check it out. I took this torch, not like the way that British people use torch, like an actual like torch, like going into a dungeon torch. And she puts like a skull on it. Look at this. That's crazy. It's like almost like it's alive. And Ian sees it and he's like, no, it's not like it's alive. It's like it's dead. He's like, I have a plan. So what they make their plan. They're like, everybody get one torch and one skull. And what we're going to do is we're going to hide in the corner. We're going to lay all these skulls out around the fire. And it's going to look like we all died mysteriously and we're burning. And then we're going to leave. We're going to hide. And so when all the tribe people come in to come look at us, we're just going to book it out. And it works perfectly. It's actually one of these things where you're like, how dark is it? Because it is night. They say that it's night. It's definitely nighttime. The tribe, like Za and tribe, all gather around and like, oh my God, they all died. What the heck happened? And then one of the sticks falls, and he's like, what? They didn't die. That's just a stick with a head on it, with a skull on it. They just tricked us. And I'm like, was that not clear the moment you saw the skull with the with the stick of the fire? How did you mistake that for a body? Like, either you believe they were smited by God and they looked really weird, or there's no body, or like the implication is that somehow the tribe thinks that they see burning dead bodies when in fact it's just like a stick and a skull. And once one of them falls over, that's only when they realize it's a stick with a skull on top of it, which is really weird. I don't really understand how that was supposed to work, even in 1963. But apparently it does, because Za and the tribe are totally convinced until one of the sticks falls over, and they're like, we got tricked. We got to go get our creatures back. They're going back to that thing in the desert. Let's go get them. This time, though, our heroes have a little bit of experience going through the forest, and they are able to basically just like book it straight to the TARDIS and get the hell out of there right in time as the tribe catches up to them, and they're like throwing spears at them, and it goes like, one like goes like right through the TARDIS basically with the cool 1963 special effects. The Doctor just like sends them anywhere is kind of his joint. He's just like, we gotta go. Just like, let's get out of here. And this is where the Doctor kind of gets into another argument with Ian, because Ian's like, oh, you didn't take us back to 1963 England. That's where I want to go. You need to take us back home. The Doctor is kind of cagey, I guess. I didn't exactly understand, because he kind of says, like, I can't do it. But the reason it's kind of vague to me is that I don't know if he kind of seems to imply that he can't do it because he doesn't actually know how to work the TARDIS correctly. He doesn't understand how to make the TARDIS go back there. As opposed to, I can't bring you back because if I take you back, then you'll tell everybody about this, about me and my granddaughter or whatever, and we have a whole situation where she wants to go with you and I don't want that to happen. It seems more like from what was said in the end of the episode, he doesn't actually know how to operate the TARDIS correctly to bring them back, or maybe that the TARDIS is broken in some way and he doesn't know how to fix it. I don't really know exactly which one of those it is, but that's kind of what's implied to me. It brings this sort of weird thing about his character into question, because it's like he spends a lot of time looking down on Barbara and Ian as like simpletons who can't possibly understand, like he does from his grand civilization that he comes from. But also, he's like pretty incompetent the whole episode. I mean, he doesn't really get to do that much. It's really mostly Ian that does all the actual, like most of the stuff. Ian makes the fire. Ian kind of takes the lead with a lot of the other stuff. He heals Za, talks to Za a lot. The Doctor does do a little bit. The Doctor does, like, for instance, he convinces the tribe that Cal is a liar, which probably does save them for sure. But he doesn't really seem to know what's going on with the TARDIS or how to operate it correctly. He like totally gets caught unaware when he goes to a new planet by a caveman, which, by the way, as an American, I have to admit, I did have the thought when they go to this strange planet, and I'm like, if there's any time to bring a gun with you, if there's any time to have some kind of weapon, man, you can't just be good. None of them got a weapon. I mean, it kind of makes sense, I guess, but except for the Doctor probably should have something. He should have a ray gun, or maybe like one of those Men in Black things where you like a memory zapper or something. They ain't got nothing, man. This dude brought out a pipe, and he has like a notepad he's writing on. It's really strange how they're like, and I'm from a grand civilization far in the future, and I really only have the TARDIS. That's the only piece of technology I got that I'm rocking with. That's going to be anything that's high tech. But yeah, the Doctor, he isn't really very competent, and he is quite petty about how he sees the 1963 Englishmen, and obviously the cavemen too, which is really interesting because it's definitely not what I expected from like my preconceived notions about what the Doctor was going to be like. I hear the word rejuvenation thrown around when talk about the Doctor a lot, which implies like some sort of immortal being. I thought that the Doctor was going to be probably very like taking a very clear leadership role, and also like I am here on a mission, or I'm here to do this thing. I'm here to help these people or finish this or do something. Instead, the Doctor that we have in this first episode, like this first Doctor, It's like an old man who's apparently from an advanced civilization with technology he doesn't quite know how to operate, stuck in time, who doesn't really seem to have any sort of mission that he's doing or anything at this point. He's just kind of chilling. He's just kind of like operating and exploring, I guess, trying to figure out how to get back to his time. I'm assuming at this point, but we don't really know. The idea that he's like kind of petty and smug and he kind of looks down on people, it was really not something that I was expecting at all. I will say though, over the course of this episode, he definitely have an arc. They all kind of have their own little thing where, they all become more competent. They all become like more accustomed to each other. And the Doctor does, I think, gain an understanding and sort of like, he definitely seems to sort of like, instead of just outright dismissing Ian and Barbara as being like, you can't understand and no, I won't take you back or whatever, and being like very weirdly cagey and not willing to explain himself. By the end of the episode, I think he's very much just like, I can't take you back, right? Or whatever. He's willing to kind of deal with them. He isn't really willing to maybe tell them everything, but he's definitely is much more willing to just be like, we're all in this together at this point. I can't do what you want me to do, or I'm unwilling to do what you want me to do. So, he does have like a little bit of an arc, but it was not what I expected from the Doctor character. And I don't know how it's going to go from here, what the other Doctors are going to be like, or even really like what they're going to explore in the rest of the episodes. I don't really know what's going to happen. But, I liked it. I had a good time. I was surprised to how engaged I was with the episodes. I just don't generally engage very well when it comes to older media, especially like movies and TV shows. And I was kind of surprised at how easy it was for me to just be like, you know what? This is cool. It wasn't near as hard to engage with it as I thought it was going to be. I won't say like it has won me over immediately or something like that, but it is very interesting, and I definitely am kind of excited to see the next episode or the next serial to kind of see like how are they going to develop this character and how are they going to get to the next Doctor? Actually, it's really I got like 3 more seasons to go before we get there, I think, from the chart that I saw. But like, yeah, how are they going to develop this guy and how are they going to get to the next guy? Anyways, at the end of the episode, once the Doctor has taken them to this new place, they're kind of looking out at this weird view through the viewing screen, and they're like, I don't even know what I'm looking at, and I don't even know where we're at. It looks like everything is fine and safe. We should just get cleaned up because we are a mess. And hey, Susan, check that Geiger counter real quick before we get cleaned up. It says we're good. Okay, let's go and get cleaned up. And then like the second they walk away, it zooms into the Geiger counter and it goes from safe to danger. Which honestly, there should be some kind of, I think there should probably be some kind of alert that goes off. Maybe in the next, maybe the start of the next serial, an alert goes off or something like that, because it seems kind of dangerous to have a Geiger counter be like danger and then no one notice it because they just happen to not be looking at the Geiger counter at that moment. And that's the end of the episode. Honestly, it was pretty cool. I think it's really interesting to see like where we are at in time. And I guess that's one of the big questions I would have about it, because I feel like there's probably a lot that I'm missing, that if you were watching this in 1963, you would be like, you might have a better understanding of what the writers and TV show people are what they're trying to do with each scene and what, like, the little things. The fact that the Doctor is smoking out of a pipe, is that them trying to like call back to something, or is that them being like, well, it's 1963, we don't know what a vape is, or something, you know what I mean? Like, and we're not gonna like invent something for that. People will probably always smoke pipes. I don't know, like, even if you're an advanced civilization, probably the old men will always smoke out of a pipe. Like, I don't know if they're trying to say something with those type of things or not. And I don't think I probably will know those things. I think calling back to the beginning of this, when they talk about that band and she's like, oh, I really like them. And Ian, I didn't say this in the episode, but Ian, when he hears them, he's like, oh, I know those people. Yeah, I know that. They're great. And Susan's like, oh, you surprised me that you know this. Is that them trying to call to like Beatles mania, which is probably happening at the time? Or at least like the Beatles are taking off? Or is it just literally like some random band that they just happen to know and they're like, this is what the young people listen to? And isn't Ian cool because he knows them too? Or like, I don't know like what that is. I don't know if it's a reference to something. I don't know if it's a real band or not. And I'd be like really interested to know what's going on in that situation. Things also like 76 Trotter Street or Road or whatever it was. Is that some just little things that might might mean something if you were in England in 1963. Anyways, excited for the next serial, and I think it's going to be a really good one. It's probably going to be really important to Doctor Who lore too.